Great. Thank you, Yanisa. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. This will be a quick 30-minute webinar. The topic today is working dogs. We'll cover the industry, supplier segmentation, market map, and I'll conclude with a quick demo on how to identify, search, and filter working dog suppliers using GovShop. So very quickly, I think I just covered the agenda. So we will do, yeah, exactly that. And by the way, we have lots of folks on today. So thanks once again, everyone, for attending. We have participants ranging across the federal, state, local, county government sectors. We also have a couple of, looks like a couple of companies in industry attending as well. But by and large, we've got lots of participants from federal government, state government, local and county government. Before I dive into today's topic, I want to cover just a couple of brief points. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Ivalua, for sponsoring this webinar. Ivalua provides a complete, unified source-to-pay suite as well as solutions. You can visit Ivalua at ivalua.com. And for those of you that may not be familiar with GovShop, GovShop is a single place to search, find, and connect with suppliers, and also to search for government contracts. GovShop is our supplier and contract discovery platform. It's easy to use, it's free, it's browser-based, so anyone can get into GovShop, create an account for free, and start searching. By the way, the advantage of creating an account is that you can save your searches, you can generate reports, and all kinds of good stuff. So I would encourage you to do that. And a couple of points about GovShop. It's built for the government with the unique needs and challenges of public sector buyers in mind. GovShop is comprehensive in the suppliers covered. This slide shows just over 1 million suppliers in GovShop. However, the count as of today is nearly 1.5 million. We continue to add current, emerging, and minority suppliers all in one place. This listing of suppliers cuts across industries. It's compiled by our technology platform consisting of machine learning as well as AI technologies. And it's also augmented by our data and market research teams. You'll find not just supplier listings, but also comprehensive profiles of suppliers in GovShop. And finally, one last note about GovShop, you can actually search by keyword, for example, working dogs, computers, cybersecurity, things like that. You can search by category codes that may be that you may be familiar with, such as PSC codes, NAICS codes, and IGP codes. You can also search by leverageable government contracts, be it federal supply schedules, national cooperatives, and other IDIQs. That's a federal term, by the way, for state and local folks. It means indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. So lots of different ways to search on GovShop. And of course, GovShop is built and powered by our company, Public Spend Forum. You can visit our company website at publicspendforum.net. And by the way, if you can see my cursor, there's a link to GovShop right off of the company's main page. Public Spend Forum is a market intelligence platform which also has lots of information on best practice frameworks, standards, and tools on how to buy and how to improve your procurement procedures and approaches. And it's also a global community and network of peers and experts in public procurement. So with those initial introductory remarks, I'd like to dive right into our topic. The first thing I'd like to do is to just level set and confirm our intuition around what do we mean by working dogs. I think for the majority of the attendees, it's probably clear and obvious. So this slide will pretty much just reinforce your intuition on what do we mean by working dogs. On this slide, I'm showing just a few of the use cases and demand drivers for working dogs, just to level set ourselves. There's lots more. It goes way beyond this. And so just going around the slide, we've got military and police applications of working dogs. We have perimeter security, search and rescue, and most of us are probably most familiar with the airport security applications for working dogs. So just a few examples of the use cases and demand drivers, just to level set ourselves. The next point I cannot overstate enough. Working dogs have provided tremendous contributions over the years, decades, centuries, and even longer. It goes way back, even beyond that. By the way, the dog on the right-hand side of the slide, that is a police dog. and the dog in the center is a cancer detection dog. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to dive right in and take a look at the industry that represents the suppliers of working dogs, also known as breeders, but I think I'll just generically use the term suppliers. So if we look at the industry of the suppliers that provide both the working dogs as well as the related services and supplies, that industry consists of four major segments. There are suppliers that provide just the dogs themselves, suppliers that provide the dog training solutions, there are suppliers that provide working dog services, and then finally dog equipment. Now, the dogs only suppliers are probably obvious, right? They provide the working dogs themselves. They do come in a couple of variations in the degree of training already provided. You can have dogs that are trained in basic obedience, personal security, guard dogs, just general security, versus dogs that are trained in a much more specialized manner, including things like detection, explosives, drugs, and so on. The next segment to the right is dog training solutions. These are suppliers that will train the dogs that you already own and or train your handlers that are employees of your organization or agency. Moving on to the right, this may be less intuitive, and that is working dog services. And what we mean by that is suppliers that will loan out dogs that they own. The supplier owns the dog. They will also loan out handlers that the supplier employs to meet, for example, surge demand. It could be a disaster situation where you need immediate assistance and augmentation of your own capacity of dogs and handlers. It could be simply to augment your staff on an event basis, for example. So working dog services are a set of suppliers which do exactly that. Think of that as a managed service or an outsourced service where they provide the dogs and the handlers. And then finally, there's dog equipment to the far right, which I probably do not need to expand on too much. There's quite a bit of overlap in the suppliers in terms of the major segments that they have offerings in. And of course, you're going to find some suppliers that only provide working dogs themselves or just provide training solutions. So there's overlap in the suppliers in terms of what they provide. And of course, there's some suppliers that just provide only one segment or two segments. So this actually further helps us understand the delineation of the industry, how the suppliers vary in their offerings, and so on. Before I move on to the market map, I want to make an interesting point here on this slide, and I won't spend too much time on this point. Recently, we were working with a federal agency that was looking at identifying a robust list of suppliers that provide working dogs. We expanded their purview to look more broadly at the industry, including the working dog services suppliers, meaning those that loan out the dogs and the handlers on an as-needed basis. And the reason that could be helpful to view the industry simultaneously, even though you're just going out to market to look for dogs only, is that you may end up in a situation to manage your category strategy and to manage your category of working dogs where from time to time, your internal customers may need support to meet surge demand requirements. So if you're not already contracted with a supplier that provides not just the dogs, but also the dog services, meaning the loaning out of the dogs and handlers, you might find yourself in a bind. So it's a good thing to keep in mind both the dogs suppliers as well as working dog services. And there's a ton of overlap between the two. So obviously you could, as part of your procurement process, you can engage with suppliers that do both. You could structure your solicitation to carve out awards for dogs only versus working dog services, or reserve the right to award both to a single supplier, depending upon how things go in the procurement process. So I just wanted to point that out as a very relevant aspect of category strategy and category management. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to a more interesting view. It's going to be the exact same 4 segments, and the bullets here represent subsegments, but it's going to be in a slightly different format. And so we refer to this as the market map. We conduct market maps for pretty much all the industries that we do a deep dive in, and working dogs just happens to be one of them. So again, this is the same industry. The total suppliers, by the way, these supplier counts come from GovShop, which I'll demo in just a few moments. The total suppliers that we have within the industry here are 93. And these 4 boxes represent the 4 boxes in violet, that is, they represent the 4 major segments. All the other boxes are the subsegments or the bullets that we saw on the previous slide. So we're literally seeing these 4 major segments and the bullets shown just simply blown out. And what this is really depicting is the count of total suppliers within each of the segments and the subsegments, which are represented by these square-ish, the rounded square boxes. And then you'll see the first 4 suppliers that appear in GovShop when you actually go to that segment or subsegment. Obviously, this slide is a bit of an eye chart, and I realize that. All I wanted to do was just to tee it up. I can take a look at each of the segments individually very briefly before we move on to the demo. The points I wanted to highlight here is, again, it's the same 4 segments that we saw previously that are listed on the right-hand side of the slide. And we're simply showing the suppliers mapped to these major segment areas and the subsegments along with supplier counts. Let's take a closer look at 1 or 2 of the major segments that we covered back over here. And then I'll move on to the demo and show you how you can find, search, and filter for these suppliers in GovShop. So the first segment, the dogs only segment, and again, just as a reminder, that's this far left box that you see in red on this slide. So if we look at the dogs only segment, first of all, the total number of dogs and related services and suppliers is 93. Out of the 93, we have 77 suppliers that definitely provide the dogs themselves. Out of the 77, all of them provide working dogs. A few of them provide untrained dogs, but our area of interest for today's webinar is working dogs themselves. So if I break down from the working dog suppliers, which is 77, 52 out of the 77, working down the left-hand side of the slide, 52 out of the 77 provide basic trained dogs, and 58 out of the 77 provide specialized trained dogs, the way we have them defined here. So that's just how to interpret this market map. And again, this market map is a depiction of the suppliers that are currently in GovShop. We are constantly updating the suppliers in GovShop, and we'll continue to do so. So these counts can change as the days, weeks, and months go by. The next few breakouts are very similar to this one. It's just a second segment. Here's the dog training solutions breakout. Again, out of the total 93 suppliers, 64 provide dog training solutions, and so on. The breakout between dog training, 54 out of the 64, versus dog handler training, 33 out of the 64. This information will be available for replay, so you can access it after the webinar is over as well on the Public Spend Forum website, and I think also on GovShop. And the next 2 slides, they just go into segment number 3 and segment number 4. But what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to move on to the GovShop demo. I want to show you how you can actually find these suppliers on GovShop, dig into the supplier profiles to see what information is actually there. And then I'm going to show you some interesting things on how you can filter this listing of suppliers even more to better suit your needs for identifying suppliers. So let's go ahead and do a quick switch over. I'm going to get out of this mode right here, and I'm going to share with you, one moment. There we go. I'm actually going to the live website for GovShop. Okay, this is the GovShop main page. And I mentioned there was multiple ways to search. I'm just going to type in working dogs in the main keyword search field. And so you have different groups of results that come up. You have the suppliers results right here. You have the commodity codes here. And you have some contract vehicles. That's interesting, that came up. I'm going to actually click on show all commodity codes. We've actually created a PSF markets, a public spend forum markets landing page for the industry. And it's this top one right here. As I hover on it, you'll see that it says view 93 suppliers. So I'm going to click on the landing page for the industry. It'll take a couple of seconds for it to load. It often does. It's still loading, but that's okay. While it's loading, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to expand on included commodity codes. Okay, here we go. And so I expanded on included commodity codes, and we see the exact same 4 segments that we had in the PowerPoint presentation. The working dog services section, and as I hover on top of it, you can see it's identifying 30 suppliers. The dog training solutions, 64 suppliers. Dogs only, 77 suppliers. The same counts that we saw on the market map. And then finally, dog equipment. When you scroll down and see if this is loaded, it may be my internet connection. So if you don't mind, I'm going to actually close out and enter into GovShop one more time. That's the tricky thing of doing a live demo, but that's okay. So I'm going to repeat what I just did one more time and get to that same place. So I'm typing in working dogs in quotes.
And while you're doing that, Ash, we do have a quick question.
Sure, let's go right ahead.
Yeah, so we just had a question on how often suppliers are added to GovShop. Specifically, someone was saying one of the things that many of the requesters emphasize is the fact that suppliers, especially those offering training, must be local. And so kind of part 2 of the question is how often suppliers are added to GovShop, and if you want to talk a little bit about the location filter, that might be helpful as well.
Sure. Short answer, in general, suppliers are added practically daily into GovShop. In fact, just today, I think we added another big batch of suppliers. We can definitely get to the location filter. And so let me work through the search and filter page where I can better demonstrate the answer to the second part of that question. Does that sound good?
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go back to where I left off. I'm going to go back into the landing page for the industry, which is dogs and related services and supplies. And I'm going to click on it. There we are. It loaded immediately that time. I had previously expanded the included commodity code section. And here's the same 4 segments. But I'm going to scroll down. So there's a total of 93 suppliers at the industry level. And of course, at the segment level, there's smaller numbers of suppliers. And first thing I'd like to show you is what does a supplier profile contain? Clearly, we have some advanced users that are asking about the location filter. So we'll definitely get to that. That'll be my concluding points is the search and filter page. But let me first click on one of these suppliers here. And I'm going to very briefly show you the information that's in a supplier profile. And this applies to any supplier, be it working dogs, be it cybersecurity, or any other emerging tech or computers or professional services, whatever the case might be. So there's a brief description of the supplier up on top in terms of their areas of specialty and expertise. This next section down, we've got some basic information on the supplier in terms of their revenue, year founded, country of origin, number of employees. We've got things like DUNS number, cage code, and other pieces of information. And the specialties and expertise is the next field down right over here where my cursor is now. Up on top, that's simply a brief company description. Scrolling down, we have contact information. Scrolling down a little bit more, we have any relevant size status, self-reported ownership, and then to the far right, this is the official government certification for any set-aside programs. These certifications come from the government, which means it comes from either the Small Business Administration or Veterans Affairs Department. Scrolling down a little bit more, you'll find any highlighted products or services of the supplier, as well as past experience if the supplier enters it in. And finally, any listing of contracts, any external recognition, downloadable content, etc. By the way, this supplier appears to be on one of the federal supply schedules. If the supplier was on a national cooperative contract, you would also see that appear here. Now, you don't have to come inside of a supplier profile to find suppliers that are on different contracts. You can obviously search from the initial search page based on searching by contracts as one of the ways to search. I'm now going to click on back to list. I'm going to go back to the list of 93 total suppliers within this industry listing. Okay, so we're back to the 93. What I'd like to do now in the few minutes that we have remaining is 93. It's not a terribly big number. Some industries end up with 1,000 suppliers. Had I searched for cyber, I'd end up with 1,000 suppliers. So it's always helpful to narrow that list down a little bit more. And so we have a browse and filter button right here that will take you to a browse and filter page and list the exact same number of suppliers you see here. So 93 suppliers total. Let me click on browse and filter suppliers. Okay, I'll pause for a few seconds in case there's a delay in the screen coming up on your end. So now here we have the same listing of 93 suppliers. And on the left, we have various search and filter parameters. You'll notice that one of them is already selected, and that is, of course, out of the 1.5 million suppliers in GovShop, we're seeing only 93 because we've already down selected to, I shouldn't say down selected, we've already filtered on the dogs and related services and supplies industry. But there's other filters you can perform. Some of the most relevant for government buyers would be, again, we have government set-aside program filters. And I'd like to demonstrate just one thing, or maybe two things here. If out of the 93 suppliers, say I want to know how many of them have the official woman-owned small business certification. So I'm going to click on woman-owned small business, and I see 11 suppliers come up. So out of the 93, 11 have the official woman-owned small business certification. I'm going to unclick that, go back to the full 93. Say I wanted to know how many of the 93 have the service disabled veteran-owned small business certification. Again, these are official government certifications. I click on that filter and I see 13 suppliers have that certification. What if I wanted to know, are there any suppliers that have both SDVOSB, which again is service disabled veteran-owned small business, and woman-owned small business? So I click on both simultaneously. 1 out of the 93 has both certifications. So these are just some ways. This is a quick overview, a quick demo webinar. So I'm showing you very quickly how you can identify the relevant set of suppliers in whatever industry you're focused on, and then filter down even further. Now, I believe the second part of the question that came up was around the location served filter. So I'm going to type in, there we go. I typed in DC, and what I wanted to filter on was Washington, DC in the United States. And if none of the 93 suppliers are in Washington, DC. I'm going to go back and reset this filter. And I may put in the state of Maryland instead. So under the location served, I'm going to type in MD for Maryland. It'll give me a whole bunch of options to choose from state, outside of the United States, definitely. There's various cities that come up. It might be better if I actually type out Maryland. Let's try that. There we go, Maryland, United States. Okay, one supplier came up in Maryland. So that's, by the way, the majority of these 93 suppliers are US based. They're from all over the United States. A few of them, I'd say about 15 to 20%, if I remember correctly, are from outside the United States. I can't help but, we did a quick analysis on the 93. Okay, about 3/4 are US based, and a whole bunch are based mostly in Europe. By the way, I will point out that for this particular market, many suppliers or breeders do not have websites. So the ones that we've included here are obviously the ones that do have websites. And so that's a quick demonstration of using GovShop to identify working dog suppliers based on the industry segmentation and the market map that we went over earlier, and also how you can filter how you can filter based on a couple of these parameters here. So we covered the government set-aside programs parameter. We also went to location served parameter as well. So hopefully that gets you started. This isn't meant to be a full-blown training session. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. This was meant to be a quick overview of the industry itself, how the industry for working dogs is delineated, and how to search for working dogs within GovShop. I would encourage you all to visit the GovShop Working Dogs page. Obviously, you want to go to the main page first. Ideally, you would create a login. By the way, without creating a login, any search you do will limit the search results to, I think, 5 suppliers or so, roughly. And if you do create a login, which again is free, you can save your searches, you can generate reports based on whatever listing of suppliers match your search results, and you can share your saved supplier lists as well. So there's lots of things you can do if you create a login. So I would encourage you all to go to GovShop, create a login, and of course, visit the GovShop Working Dogs main page as well. Also, I'd like to point out that on the GovShop main page, there's lots of tutorials to get you up and running on using GovShop to get the most out of your search experience on GovShop and finding suppliers and contracts. And on that note, let me check in with Yanisa. We do have a couple of minutes remaining. Did any other questions come up?
We have no other questions.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for attending today's very quick demo and overview of the Working Dogs industry market map and the GovShop demo. Thanks again. Have a good day.